But the first question that I wanted to ask you, Pine Sap, and I think this is a question that a lot of people, especially, once you get past the age of like 28, 29, 30, is what is a Groyper? Like, what is a Groyper? What does it mean? Like, what qualifies as a Groyper? Like, if I wanted to like be a Groyper tomorrow, do I sign up, in the online Groyper form on like nickfuentes.com? Do I join the Rumble channel? Like, what constitutes a Groyper?
So what constitutes a Groyper is the term's etymology comes from a variant of Pepe that I think dropped in like 2017. And you can look it up on Know Your Meme, but the Anon who is writing about the character said, this guy's name is Groyper and he's like a chill friend and what have you. And early on, the Groyper PFP, the Groyper profile picture, was synonymous with being just a part of the far right. But it was understood that Nick's fans, Nick Fuentes fans, use the PFP almost exclusively, so it became synonymous with being a supporter of America First, which is the movement that Nick heads up. And what makes our movement different is it is completely grassroots, it's organic, and it's decentralized. It's not a membership org. You don't sign your name to anything. It's just you vocalize support. And there's a reason for that, because membership orgs really, when we get on the dissident right, tend to be kind of precarious. And sometimes you get people involved who are feds, who are ill-intentioned, or who might misrepresent that movement or misrepresent that movement's values or missions. And so the decentralization of America First is actually a tactical advantage to not getting associated with anyone we don't want to be associated with, and not having any potential for like Fed infiltration or what have you.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to like the specific, like ideological, I guess might be the best word, the specific ideological constituency of, to put it like complexly, of Groyper, a Groyperism. Is it more so like you hold to a degree of like postulates, like I believe X, Y, and Z, and therefore I'm a Groyper? Or is it more of a personal allegiance, like I hold to what Nick Fuentes holds to, and therefore I'm a Groyper?
So it's kind of a little bit of both. We who are in AF feel that Nick is the best political commentator around right now, of all time, really. And so we do tend to follow his positions that he has, because he does a lot of study on foreign policy, domestic policy, all these different issues currently affecting our country, and puts it through a faithful Catholic lens. And so that lends a lot of credibility and trust to us wanting to throw our weight behind him. But at the same time, if you wanted to paint sort of an ideological brush broadly, I would say the closest political position is the paleocon position that Pat Buchanan, Samuel T. Francis, and Joseph Sobran mapped out, which was a more confessional Catholic conservative approach to politics. One that the sort of normie right, or the normal right wing, the normal Republican Party, tried to kind of excise out of the Republican Party around the 1980s through men like William F. Buckley and National Review.
Yeah, so when it comes to the degree in which one agrees to Nick or disagrees with Nick, like as a sort of like personal authority, like is there room for allowable differences in opinion? And this might bring in kind of at least my the objection that I hear from a lot of people. I was talking actually with a classic anti-Groyper A-logger last night, and I was just like, hey man, give me all your best objections, I'll throw them up the sappy, and we'll talk about them. But the first thing is that it seems like when it comes to the movement itself, there's not really much, room for disagreement on like secondary or tertiary issues. And I don't think this is something that Nick himself has. Actually, my first interaction with Nick was I had disagreed. I kind of wrote out a lot of what I thought about Nick on a long Twitter post, and Nick actually screenshotted it, put it on his, shared it on his Telegram. And he said this was a fair critique, like some of the critiques that I had and some of the differences of opinion. He said he thought it was fair and balanced. So it seems like Nick himself is actually very open to hearing out what other people think. And I think that's very admirable. But maybe this is like a Groyper thing. Is that like a fair way of putting it, that Nick is more open to it if they're fair and, they're honest, they're in good faith? whereas Groypers oftentimes they have a difficulty with discerning good from bad faith criticism.
So I think the main thing that we take issue with broadly is the finger wagging and lecturing. Finger wagging and lecturing is not something that we're really interested in. And that's generally a bad faith approach. But fair criticisms or fair approaches, I would definitely say Nick is open to. And if it is presented in such a way that comes from a constructive basis and not wanting to tear us down and not wanting to disrupt what we're trying to do, then I would say definitely Nick is open to that kind of criticism. And there's other tertiary issues where we might not exactly agree on literally every single thing ever, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because I'll give a good example. Nick doesn't really like Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings, right? And he's more of a Game of Thrones guy. That's totally fine. I can disagree with him on that, and it doesn't make me disloyal. It doesn't make me someone who is outside the pale of AF or anything like that. The problem is a lot of the A-logs are nasty. They're not nice people. They're very rude. They're very boisterous, and they put themselves in this position of authority that they don't otherwise have. I've said this before, I think even on your stream, but if you're some kid living in a college dorm and you're looking at Nick who ends up on Times Square and on Mother Jones and the Washington Post and all these magazines, and you're saying, oh, from my college dorm on my YouTube channel or on my Twitter account that has 100 followers, I'm going to make criticisms of the movement, it comes off as being very self-indulgent and I think not really based in reality. Whereas people who come along and want to build up this movement and make it better, I think there is definitely a room for those people to offer their insight and their constructive criticism. But A-logs don't do that. They're just seeking to tear down. They're seeking to slander all of us and say nasty things. And then when they get called out for it, they run this sort of defense or this boy who cried wolf where they're like, oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm just being, offering constructive criticism. It's like, what's constructive about you insulting us or insinuating nasty things about us? Nothing. And, for people who are not Catholic, I don't excuse it, but it's kind of like, I expect it. You know what I mean? Like, when you hear like, this sounds awful, but like when you hear of a new war starting in the Middle East, it's like, it's bad, but you're like, it's just another Tuesday. You know what I mean? But when I see Catholics engage in this kind of behavior, I think it's incredibly uncharitable. And I think it's incredibly bad faith, and I would even sometimes argue sinful. And they defend it with this sort of beating their chest like the Pharisee, this sort of holier-than-thou piety, but that's not going to take any of us away from God's divine judgment of misjudging our brother or mischaracterizing our brother.